If my rights are restored, I'll be at the Euros. If my rights are not restored, I'll listen to commentators.
Platini, a 3-time Ballon d'Or winner, carried the trophy for the French team the last time his country hosted a Euro tournament.
And we'll have more news later. It's time now for The World This Week. It's The World This Week. 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. We're in the company of Anne Baghe-Murray of the International New York Times. How are you?
Very well.
We're also joined by Anne-Elisabeth Moutet of the Sunday Telegraph.
Hello.
We got to say congratulations to Antonio Rodriguez of the French news agency AFP. He's churned out a book on France's former economy minister, Arnaud Montebourg, in French, which Montebourg perhaps with presidential ambitions, we'll see. And Erin Zaleski, Paris correspondent for The Daily Beast. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
The World This Week, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, our hashtag World This Week. With Venezuela's opposition launching a recall petition against the president and world crude prices in the doldrums, Nicolas Maduro seems to have Mother Nature against him as well. A severe drought drying the Guri Dam, the country's main provider of electricity. And so, desperate times call for desperate measures.
As
I instructed, the Vice President announced a new necessary measure for the public sector to work Monday and Tuesday as we go through these extremely critical weeks in which we are doing everything to save the Guri Dam.
Anne Baghe-Murray, the 2-day work week, how does that sound to you? Tuesday becoming the new Friday.
Some people think that's the way it is in France already. So, but I don't. Anyway, it's wow. You can laugh about this, and the Venezuelans are laughing about this. There are lots and lots of jokes about the ways in which the government will next ask the citizens to save energy. Certain, don't eat breakfast, or do eat breakfast, or don't eat certain things. But it's just sad to see a country that's mired not only in corruption, lack of good ideas for governance, low resource prices. Lots of countries are dealing with that. But in this case, with the government trying to cut its way to greatness, let's everybody take in our belts a little bit more. Let's find these kinds of creative solutions, Band-Aids on the bigger problem. And then if they get rid of the current president, which the opposition would like to do, who steps into his place? It's a little bit like the Brazilian situation. If Dilma Rousseff goes, there are 5 or 6 people lined up from her party who the Brazilians think are just as horrible as she is. So, it's funny in a way, but it's very, very tragic. It's very sad, especially if you're a Venezuelan.
Does Venezuela's situation mirror that of Brazil's, Antonio?
I don't believe that Brazil is in the same situation. Venezuela is really dramatic. It's dramatic and sad because they had a lot of oil and a lot of incomes thanks to oil for a decade with Hugo Chavez, and they didn't diversify. And today we can almost say that Venezuela and Chavismo is a kind of collateral damage victim of the struggle, the war between the Arabia Saudi and the United States, between the Saudis who didn't decide to decrease the production of oil in order to fight against the shale oil industry in the US. And now we have first Venezuela, and maybe other oil countries will face the same turmoils in the next year.
All right, reactions on the hashtag World This Week, and a lot of them are a bit glib, shall we say. I think Maduro's been doing quite a good job of recalling himself over the past years. Yeah, there's that petition to recall the president. And he's a bit Moutet. Venezuela, the collateral damage of Saudi Arabia's push to keep the price of oil low?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Venezuela is basically a cautionary tale to people who believe left-wing populists these days, because what they're doing is for the past 15, 20 years, ever since Chavez was elected, and I can't recall the date now, but this is basically the solutions that are advocated right now by the Nuit Debout movement on Place de la République. These are the get rid of the rich, the collectivize everything, apply all those solutions, and this is one of those new examples that we apparently need every 30 years to show that it does not work. You may not like capitalism, but
the World Bank and the IMF say that he had a pretty good run at one point, Chavez, lifting people out of poverty.
He had a pretty good run distributing whatever was left, but he can't produce more. So it just does not work. It just does not work. The citizens are now very unhappy. Long before the price of oil went down, they could not even have toilet paper. It's a disaster, and it should be seen as a cautionary tale. We may not like a lot of aspects of the modern capitalistic world, but it is worse when you don't have it.
Aaron Zaleski himself, the President Maduro, blaming the United States, calling it a U.S.-backed coup.
Well, I mean, I think, again, that goes back a number of years ago. Like Antonio was saying, when the Saudi Arabia and the U.S., backed by the U.S., manipulated the cost of oil to cripple the Soviet dependency on oil. And I think there's resentment about that still lingers in the country today, and that can come up in today's debates.
The coup is something Hugo Chavez used to say. I was in Washington at that time, and he always said the Washington wanted to make a coup in Venezuela, and it was always when things were bad in Venezuela. So that's always the same argument.
All right, Venezuela, the country that sits on the world's largest proven oil reserves. As for the one that still pumps the most crude, well, it is Saudi Arabia. And it's keeping the tap open in these times of slumping prices. But the kingdom and its 30-year-old deputy crown prince this week turning heads when he acknowledged that the oil won't flow forever.
We have developed an unhealthy oil addiction in Saudi Arabia, and this is dangerous and has hampered our development in many sectors during the past years.
And Baggy-Murray, do you believe that Saudi Arabia can do like Germany and do its, what they call it in Germany, an Energiewende, where they make that switch to renewables?
Switch to renewables. And well, they'd have plenty of solar and probably a great deal of wind and water generating capacity. But I mean, the problem in Saudi Arabia isn't a lack of will on the part of the young deputy crown prince. And it probably isn't even a lack of being able to read the signs of what should happen in the country to reduce dependence on it. It's the big problem is that it's a religious state. The Wahhabists don't really want the kinds of reforms that the deputy crown prince is proposing along with the economic reforms. It comes as a package in Saudi Arabia. And everybody, including the New York Times, says, great ideas, terrific, long overdue, good luck.
Aaron Zaleski?
I don't know exactly. I mean, it was something that sounded really good in the speech and on paper, but the implementation is another question. And I think the general idea is to have Saudi Arabia wants to be this major global player in the 21st century. And as long as it maintains kind of Bronze Age ideas about women's rights, I don't see that happening. There was a lot of chat about, we need more women in the workforce, et cetera. That sounds good, but women still can't drive, still can't open a bank account without her husband or a male relative present. So how are these women supposed to enter the workforce?
He's talking about increasing the percentage of women in the workforce from the current 22% to 30%. Okay, right. It puts the eye on incremental. Right. So.
Right. So.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not very often in a position to say good things about Saudi Arabia, but I meet every now and then our representatives of that generation, and they are rather impressive, and I include in those, he very obviously was taught abroad partly, but I meet young Saudis who are taught in local universities and do not go to religious courses, which still, 60% of doctorates in Saudi Arabia is doctorates in religion, and that is a real problem. But I think actually right now, because Saudi Arabia is so frightened of Iran, the young are allowed to say some things that might change the country. I think it's very dangerous. It may not work out. There are powerful forces for reaction. I don't think any of the imams, any of the religious police who've now had their wings slightly clipped, etc., are going to like this. And so there's a massive danger for that country erupted in a bloody revolution in a way that will not be liked. But I think the efforts are right now are very interesting. They're unusual, and I've in the past 2-3 years, I've been rather impressed by the young generation of Saudis, the under 30s.
Antonio Rodriguez?
They are interesting, but why now? It's late. Even the Emirates decided to make the same earlier, and you have for 60 years, everybody knew that oil was not there forever, and all those countries just relied on the incomes of oil, and today, even the Saudis are facing troubles inside the country, and they have to try something else. And I'm just surprised that they lasted so many years to realize that oil was not there forever.
We've talked about how the June Brexit referendum is tearing apart the ruling Conservatives in the UK, how the campaign to stay in Europe has seen the name of its main cheerleader, David Cameron, brought up in the Panama Papers scandal. But this week, all he had to do was sit back and watch the very public blow-up inside the opposition Labour Party.
You dare say that Hitler supported Zionism? You've lost it, mate. You need help. You read the Nazi policy.
Yes.
You read Mein Kampf.
Yes.
What did Mein Kampf say about Zionism?
I mean,
What did Mein Kampf say about Zionism?
Hitler's a mad anti-Zionist. He wanted to kill all Jews. But his policy in 1932, when he won that election, was to deport Germany's Jews to Israel. And the Zionist movement had secret meetings with this administration talking about that.
Now, those remarks got Ken Livingstone suspended from the Labour Party, the former mayor of London. Factually, is he correct, though?
Should we even ask? I mean, should we even ask such questions? That is outrageous. This is a man who was the mayor of London for, I think, 8 years. And he is mouthing, the most vile propaganda that is not even true. And what's really interesting is he and his friend George Galloway are two sort of outliers. But what this has now betrayed is that the entire section of Labour Party, and not all of Labour, because God knows I have many Labour friends who are horrified at what's going on right now, have bought into a vile version of anti-Semitism that was peddled.
All right, explain to us how that's anti-Semitism.
To say that Hitler was pro-Zionist, I mean, I don't think that. This is somebody who wrote Mein Kampf when he was in jail in 1922, 1923, 1924. This is somebody who said that the Jews were the most disgusting things and he would get rid of them. Zionism is not something about getting rid of the Jews. It is something entirely different. And the whole thing belongs to the same thing that you now have extreme rightists in France defending it, which is to say that because Jews have had dramatic fate in the middle of the 20th century, the same expressions, the same words must be applied to them so that they can be called Nazis.
But
if this is not anti-Semitism,
we've had the far-right leader in France, Jean-Marie Le Pen, who for years has been a strong supporter of Israel. And there's the sort of the implicit thing is the Jews should go to Israel and get away from France.
I don't think that Le Pen said that, but Le Pen certainly said things like the Holocaust never really happened, it was a point of detail, things like that, because you want to deny a point of history because these people bother us and we want to be able to hate them without being guilted about it. But the fact is that you cannot be elected in lots of places, constituencies in Britain, when you're Labour, without voicing that kind of anti-Zionism that merges and segues into anti-Semitism. And because of these people, because of that, if you do not say things like that MP who triggered the whole thing, because Ken Livingstone was just reacting to something, and he likes to provoke anyway, and he's a bit like Le Pen in the ways that he wants to say really horrible things, and he will go past the Godwin point at light speed. But it started with the MP of the city of Bradford, who's a woman called Naz Shah, who's a perfectly, until now completely okay member of the Labour Party, backbencher, doing fine, and suddenly her writings in Facebook come up from 2 years ago, and the idea is let's deport all Israel into America. It's, you know, let's forget about the fact that transporting Jews is not really an expression you should be using. But the idea is that the country that was decided the same year that Pakistan and India were made into two separate states, the country that before, you know, even within the borders in 1967 should not exist, the entire thing should be shipped off to America. Well, if, you know, again, this is anti-Semitism, and this is the way to be elected in the city of Bradford. This is worrisome. The Labour Party right now is tearing itself apart because there are all members of what used to be Labour, union leaders, and normal left-wingers in Britain who say, who are we and who are these people and why do they speak in our name? And all of this was made possible because of the election of the extremist Jeremy Corbyn to the head of the Labour Party, because people were fed up with the people that were with Tony Blair. But what's happening to the Labour Party in Britain is something that really should worry us all, because it will happen in other places in Europe.
And Bagger-Murray?
It's happening already. I mean, there are all kinds of dog whistle statements that are coming out of the American presidential election. Ted Cruz with his New York values, talking about Donald Trump and his New York values. There are a lot of people who thought that was coded anti-Semitism. You may not agree, but it came out.
The thing is, you don't need codes in Britain. You know, there you've got.
Well, you don't need codes in a lot of places, and you make a very good point. In some places, that's an excellent way to get yourself elected. Yep. I was looking into this. I'm not a close student of British politics, but I was looking into how this started with somebody liking a post on. She didn't even post it; she liked it. Now, to me, let's leave aside, if we can, please, because I'm not that familiar with I couldn't answer your question as to whether what Ken Livingstone said was historically accurate. I just don't know. But I do know this much: when you start dissecting the social media postings and start parsing what people say on social media, you're talking about an area where there is a massive possibility for misinterpretation, for skewing, for blowing out of proportion. If this young woman, if this counselor from Bradford didn't understand that on social media you can't control what happens to what you do. Well, she commented,
she said many things. I mean, you say she liked one publication, one post, but she reposted, she commented on other things, and that's the only way to get yourself elected in that specific place.
Okay, so what you're saying is she did it in complete knowledge that this was going to play into a narrative that would help her get elected.
Yes.
Okay, well, another way of looking at it is that back in the day, this kind of thing would not have been a story. It would not have ever surfaced. And there would have been perhaps a more reasoned debate over whether, for example, support of Palestine, which is a plank of the Labour Party, really can be considered anti-Semitism, whether it's anti-Zionism.
It depends which support.
Well,
you know, it's absolutely fine to say we want the two-state solution, we want Palestinians to have rights. This is absolutely fine. Saying Jews are Nazis, saying that the entire country, the entire Jewish population should be thrown into the sea, you know, being friends with Hamas, who say exactly that on their charter, that crosses over to something different, because you say there's one place that is unacceptable, and every single member of them, and they are called the Jews. And when Nas Shah commented, she says the Jews are out in force in the social media because she was being criticized. Not the Israelis, not the pro-Israelis, the Jews. So no, we're crossing over, and I think it's very easy to tell the difference.
Antonio Rodriguez?
I'm just surprised by all this debate in the UK, and you made a point with Trump, with the values, the New York values. I didn't see that like this, but I see today in all the countries, even here in France, in Spain, this kind of way to try to convince the electorate to try to be elected. And there is a red line. And I just noticed that in this case, this red line was, they passed the red line.
All right, we're going to have more when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching The World This Week.